depending on the stage at which the business is at what period of time would you suggest growth and at what period of time would you suggest profitability between the two?
Well, it's different for different sectors. You know, large consumer businesses require a lot of capital to be sunk in. And if you're doing category development, a good example is e-commerce. A good example is the cab aggregators. There you have to sink in a lot of capital because you're changing habits. You're building a new category. Where you have an existing category and you've got an insight around a product or a service which could disrupt the current players and take away some share, then in that case you won't require that kind of capital upfront. So the profits could come much earlier. So an example could be if you come up with a line of Indian beverages, or you come up with a line of Indian inspired snacks and make a branded category out of it. The demand for that is there. You're simply converting the unorganized sector into the organized.
Sure.
If you come up with a brand of footwear which converts people from the unorganized street footwear which is available to the branded footwear, that's a perfect example of not having to sell the category but sell your brand and your product, and the roads to profits can be much earlier.
So the most important thing in a success of a venture is the litmus test ultimately. What is that litmus test for any enterprise?
So the litmus test is that you have customers, paying ones at that, customers who are loyal, customers who are willing to swear by you and leave their existing brands behind is even better. If you have any intellectual property which secures that revenue and helps you to charge a premium versus other products or services available in the market, that is definitely a litmus test that you're a true entrepreneur and you've created something unique.
All right, so as long as the consumer is ready to pay for what you've created, you can't be expecting, an angel investor or maybe a venture capitalist firm to be investing in you. You've got to be able to prove your product yourself.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so if you've also referred to exit and exit strategies, what is the gyan that you would want to offer us in that?
Well, look, the exit strategy is different for different investors. Exits for angels happens when there is an institutional round and you're getting a certain multiple which you feel is healthy. You have been supporting the investment for a certain period of time that you define was good for you. Typically it could be anywhere between 18 months to 36 months.
Okay.
And thereafter you are getting a good multiple, so you could let go of some of the equity and cash yourself out. Feel good about that investment, and then could move on. So from the investing side, it is really, I think, a minimum time of 18 months to 36 months that you should let the whole idea develop, flower, and get the institutional round to come in. Very often it also happens when there are some large individual investors who may come in and purchase equity from the existing investors. That can also happen.
And who has your mentor been, or where have you drawn your inspiration from?
So I've always had this so-called Indian Kida of entrepreneurship right from the start. So I worked many years ago in the first round of the .com boom with India.com. So I would say that my first entrepreneur over there, and I've been in touch with him, is Sunil Lulla. So he continues to be my sounding board, and a tough one at that. So I owe my appreciation to him for bringing me into the entrepreneurial world.
Nice. You mentioned the .com bust, and there's a lot of young entrepreneurs that we see are starting off who have probably never experienced what it means to be, going under completely, like how we experienced in the year 2000. Do you think that in a way is a kind of a drawback with the young ones?
Not really. Look, I think we were too early at that point of time. India wasn't ready for that, and we have now significantly large enough number of consumers, A, who can afford things, B, the growth of the internet has been just tremendous. As we all know, we had 1 million maybe internet consumers in the year 2000, and today it's running into 400 million. So that's virtually covering the entire urban population of India. So it makes much more sense today to be able to launch businesses which are based on the internet and are based on a consuming class which is far bigger than what it was yesterday. So I think your risks are much lower in that sense than in what it was at that point of time. If you require deeper pockets at that point of time and a longer sort of gestation period, today I think you have the luxury of being able to test your idea in one city and get enough consumers to be able to prove whether it is a success or not. So that, I think, facility did not exist at that point of time to that extent.
So you're quite positive about the future, and as far as the tech space is concerned and Indian startups are concerned.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is the only way to go. Most of the statistics will tell you that many companies which were in the Fortune 500 list many years ago do not exist today. And this is because they have been disrupted by businesses which came out from nowhere, gave the consumer what they wanted at the price and the service that they liked, and built a brand for themselves. Sure. Google is a perfect example of that. So it came out as a search engine, and if we ask today, is it a search engine only? No, it is not. It's affecting every other aspect of our life.
It's Baba Google.
So so there are businesses which have flowered right under us in the last 20 years and displaced some of the so-called biggies in the Fortune list.
And if you were to recommend a book or something that has inspired you, what would that be?
Well, I get more time to read actually online. So in fact, I'm a habitual reader of online blogs, posts. I do happen to read Dr. Travis Bradbury quite a bit.
Okay.
Right? And he gives a lot of lessons on leadership, and I find that it has a great interface with entrepreneurship and how you essentially are building your own self for whatever challenge might be there. So right now I am facing the challenge of entrepreneurship, being with them and being an entrepreneur myself. So how am I building my own self as a leader in this space versus being a leader in the corporate space? Correct. Is very different. I think I really highly regard him. So I read his posts, I read his articles on LinkedIn and other spaces. So I would say that's a great read, and I'll recommend that to everyone.
And 5 apps that you can't do without?
Well, I can't do without my Uber. I use Uber almost, I think, on a weekly basis, if not daily. I use TripAdvisor, I use Amazon, then all my banking apps.
Okay. In the hope of building a successful venture, I personally feel sometimes I think the support systems are undervalued. What do you have to say about that?
Well, you need a great support system even when you're in a corporate job, right? And all corporate jobs tend to be stressful, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree with that. Similarly, I think the world of entrepreneurship is no different. It carries challenges and stress, issues of its own. Of course, you're dealing with the inherent risk that comes along with a venture, whether the idea is going to succeed or not. If you've put in money as an investor, whether the team is committed or not, what if they change their mind? What if it doesn't scale up? What if someone else comes in and becomes bigger and better at it? So one looks forward, one has to have a good support system of mentors, of friends, of peers, and certainly in the family. One's got to have a little chat if you're going down this path, and I certainly had that chat with my wife before we went along this path, that is there better uses of this money that we have? Are we eating into our nest egg, so to speak, nowhere close to retirement? Is this the right thing to do? So these are all sorts of questions that one has to talk it out, address, make sure you're not throwing the kitchen sink at it, right? But at the same time, you're not underpitching yourself as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And also I think choosing the right partner probably becomes an extremely, now in retrospect of course, but with the way the Indian cultural system is also evolving, and also if we are promoting entrepreneurship, one needs to make very conscious decisions, not only as far as your personal lives are concerned, but also as a partake of your professional ventures ahead.
So choosing the right partner for the young ones today, if I may say, for your professional journey as an entrepreneur is extremely critical. Today, of course, parents of children are becoming far more amenable and open to the idea of their son or daughter marrying somebody who is an entrepreneur. But at the same time, I think it's very important to sit down and have a conversation about your commitment and see if that is going to affect their decision or not. And if they're willing to support you, if they're willing to be with you, then that is a critical conversation to have rather than have a surprise at the other end, and it comes in the way of you developing your professional venture and also being equally satisfied in your professional life. So the choice of a partner is extremely critical.
Thank you so much, Anup. Thank you for
you.
taking time for doing this.
Thank you so much, Suparna.